Number 1. The country where a cup of coffee costs less than $1 and a 2-bedroom apartment rents for $200 a month, yet somehow, this place produces some of the most striking women in all of Europe, and traditions so old they make the rest of the continent look brand new. Welcome to Serbia, a landlocked nation of just under 7 million people, sitting at the crossroads of the Balkans, sandwiched between Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Croatia, and Bosnia. It's a country most Americans couldn't point to on a map, but it might be the last place in Europe where you can still live like royalty on a bartender's salary. Before we get into it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Drop your city and your local time in the comments below. I read every single one. Now let's get into why Serbia has quietly become one of the most talked about countries for anyone chasing a cheaper, richer life. Number 2. The rent that makes Manhattan look insane. In Belgrade, the capital, a 1-bedroom apartment in the center of the city runs somewhere between $300 and $450 a month. Step outside the city center, maybe into Zemun or Voždovac, and that number drops to $200, sometimes less. Compare that to the $7,000 a month it takes to rent a comparable apartment in Manhattan. A full lunch at a proper restaurant in Belgrade, think grilled meat, a side of ajvar, bread, and a drink, will run you about $5. A cappuccino costs $1.50. A monthly public transit pass is around $20. Health insurance, if you're not covered through work, costs less per month than a single copay at an American urgent care clinic. And here's the detail that quietly changes everything. Serbia isn't in the European Union. That means no EU price inflation, no euro adoption driving up costs the way it did in neighboring Croatia. Prices here have stayed stubbornly, wonderfully low, even as the rest of Europe has gotten more expensive every single year. For around $1,000 a month, a foreigner can live comfortably in central Belgrade. A nice apartment, dinners out several nights a week, a gym membership, weekend trips to the mountains, or down to Novi Sad. Push that budget to $1,500 and you're living like someone earning 6 figures back home. Even everyday groceries reflect this gap. A weekly shop that would run well over $100 in a mid-sized American city costs closer to $35 or $40 at a Belgrade supermarket, and the open-air farmers markets, called pijaka, undercut even that, with fresh produce, eggs, and homemade cheese sold directly by the people who made them. But rent and coffee prices are just the surface. What actually pulls people in and keeps them talking about Serbia long after they've left is something else entirely. Number 3. The women who look like they walked out of a Renaissance painting and into a Balkan bakery. Walk down Knez Mihailova, the main pedestrian street in Belgrade, on any given afternoon, and you'll understand immediately why Serbian women have developed a reputation that precedes them across the entire continent. Tall, often 5'8" or taller, with the kind of sharp cheekbones and dark, deep-set eyes that come from a bloodline mixing Slavic, Illyrian, and Ottoman influences over centuries of conquest and migration. But it's not just the physical features, it's the way they carry themselves. There's a phrase Serbians use, biti fina, which loosely translates to being refined, put together, dignified. Even on an ordinary Tuesday, running errands, a Serbian woman will show up in a full face of makeup, a tailored coat, heels that click against the cobblestones with purpose. This isn't vanity, it's cultural expectation, passed down from grandmothers who survived wars, sanctions, and economic collapse, and still insisted on looking presentable while doing it. Underneath the polish is something harder to fake. Serbian women are famously direct. Ask one what she thinks, and you will get an honest answer, delivered without hesitation, sometimes without much softening either. A friend who spent a year teaching English in Belgrade told me, "The women here will tell you exactly what's wrong with your shirt, your haircut, and your life choices, all in the same sentence, and somehow you'll thank them for it. Education plays a huge role here too. Serbia has one of the highest percentages of women with university degrees in the Balkans, and women make up a significant share of doctors, lawyers, and engineers in the country. The stereotype of the Balkan woman as purely domestic has been quietly dismantled over the last 2 decades, replaced by a generation of women who are just as likely to be running a pharmaceutical lab as they are hosting a family Sunday lunch. Belgrade University consistently produces more female graduates in medicine and law than male, a statistic that surprises visitors who arrive expecting an older, more traditional gender dynamic, and instead find something closer to the opposite. And when the sun goes down, that same discipline and directness transforms into something else entirely. Number 4. The nightlife that runs on a floating barge and never seems to end. If you've heard anything about Belgrade's reputation, it's probably this. The city has some of the best nightlife in Europe, and almost nobody outside the region knows it. The scene revolves around splavovi, floating nightclubs built on barges, anchored along the Sava and Danube rivers. Some hold a few hundred people, others thousands, blasting everything from turbo folk to techno until the sun comes up. Turbo folk deserves its own mention here. It's a hybrid genre, part Balkan folk melody, part electronic pop, born in the chaos of the 1990s during the Yugoslav wars and international sanctions. To outsiders, it can sound almost comically over the top, all wailing vocals and thumping bass. To Serbians, it's practically sacred. Walk into any splav after midnight and you'll see grandmothers' granddaughters dressed in designer heels, screaming every lyric in unison, standing on tables, completely unbothered by anyone watching. Belgrade nightlife doesn't really start until 11 at night, and it doesn't slow down until 6 or 7 in the morning. Locals will tell you, with a straight face, that Belgrade has genuinely rivaled Berlin and Amsterdam for its underground scene. Entry to most splavovi costs next to nothing, sometimes free before midnight, and a full night out, cover charge, drinks, even a taxi home can still come in under $30, a price that would barely cover the cover charge alone at a comparable club in Western Europe. But there's a quieter side to Serbian social life too, one that happens over strong coffee rather than loud music. Number 5. The coffee culture that treats a cup of espresso like a 3-hour commitment. In Serbia, coffee isn't something you grab on the way to work. It's an event. Sitting down for kafa with a friend can easily eat up an entire afternoon, and nobody rushes you out. Cafes in Belgrade and Novi Sad are designed for lingering wicker chairs spilling onto sidewalks, ashtrays still present at most tables, despite indoor smoking bans elsewhere in Europe. This slow, deliberate approach to socializing extends into nearly every part of Serbian life. Business meetings often start with 20 minutes of small talk before anyone mentions the actual reason for the meeting. Family dinners can run 4 or 5 hours, with course after course appearing long after you thought the meal was finished. There's a phrase for this general unhurried approach to life. Though Serbians borrow the same philosophy, their neighbors in Croatia call fjaka, a kind of contented laziness that treats rushing as almost undignified. For visitors used to grabbing a coffee to go and eating lunch at their desk, this can feel jarring at first, then oddly addictive. Several expats who've relocated describe the exact moment it clicked for them, usually somewhere around the 3rd or 4th week, when they stopped glancing at their phone during coffee and just let the conversation run wherever it wanted to go. But underneath this relaxed daily rhythm sits a history that is anything but relaxed. Number 6. The country that survived bombs, sanctions, and hyperinflation that makes Weimar Germany look tame. In the 1990s, as Yugoslavia violently broke apart, Serbia found itself isolated, sanctioned, and eventually bombed by NATO in 1999 during the Kosovo conflict. During this period, the country experienced one of the worst hyperinflation events in recorded history. At its peak in January 1994, prices were doubling roughly every 16 hours. Serbians tell stories of getting paid in the morning and rushing to spend the money before lunch, because by evening it would buy noticeably less. The government eventually printed a 500 billion dinar note, an amount so absurd it became a kind of dark joke that Serbians still reference today. Older generations lived through years where savings accounts became worthless overnight, where store shelves emptied because merchants couldn't reprice goods fast enough to keep up with the collapsing currency. And yet, somehow, the country pulled itself out. Since the early 2000s, Serbia has rebuilt its economy, stabilized its currency, and grown steadily, even without EU membership to lean on. Belgrade today has a functioning stock exchange, a growing tech sector, and international companies like Microsoft and NCR running major offices in the city. The scars from the 90s are still visible, if you know where to look. Bombed-out buildings left standing deliberately in central Belgrade as memorials right next to glass office towers housing some of the biggest names in global technology. This resilience shows up in Serbian culture in ways that go beyond economics. Number 7. The Slava tradition that turns every family into its own small church. Perhaps the most unique cultural institution in Serbia is Krishna Slava, the celebration of a family's patron saint. Unlike most religious traditions that center on the individual, Slava is inherited through the father's line and celebrated by the entire extended family, sometimes stretching to over 100 people once a year on the saint's feast day. The household prepares a slavski kolač, a special round bread marked with a cross, along with koljivo, boiled wheat mixed with sugar and walnuts, symbolizing the cycle of life and death. A priest visits the home to bless the bread, and then the doors open, quite literally, to anyone who wants to stop by. Neighbors, co-workers, distant relatives, even acquaintances can walk in unannounced, and the host is obligated to feed them. No invitation required. This tradition dates back over 1,000 years, tied to the introduction of Christianity to the Serbian people, and UNESCO recognized it as an element of intangible cultural heritage in 2014. Families keep the same slava for generations, sometimes centuries, and changing it, even after marriage or relocation, is considered almost unthinkable. Food plays an enormous role in Serbian identity, outside of religious tradition too, and some of it borders on the extreme. Number 8. The meat obsession that would make a Texas pitmaster nervous. Serbian cuisine centers almost entirely around grilled meat, and the national dish, cevapi, small grilled sausages made from a mix of beef and lamb, served with flatbread called lapinja, and a side of raw onion, appears on nearly every restaurant menu in the country. But cevapi is just the entry point. Pljeskavica is essentially a Serbian burger, a large, flattened patty of seasoned ground meat, often stuffed with cheese or kajmak, a rich, clotted cream that Serbians spread on everything from bread to grilled meat. Kajmak alone deserves its own mention, a dairy product so beloved that families will drive hours to specific villages known for producing the best batches. Then there's sarma, cabbage rolls stuffed with minced meat and rice, simmered for hours until the cabbage practically dissolves. Winter without sarma is considered almost unpatriotic in Serbian households. And rakiza, the fruit brandy that functions as both a social lubricant and, according to older generations, a cure for nearly every ailment from a cold to heartbreak. Refusing a shot when offered is considered deeply rude, regardless of the time of day. This obsession with meat and dairy has an interesting side effect. Serbia has one of the lowest rates of vegetarianism in Europe, and finding a proper vegetarian restaurant outside Belgrade can be a genuine challenge. But the culinary tradition runs even deeper than daily meals, into festivals that stretch back centuries. Number 9. the festivals that turn entire towns into open-air parties for a week straight. Guča, a small town in central Serbia with a population of around 2,000 people, transforms every August into the site of the largest brass band festival on Earth. The Guča Trumpet Festival draws over 500,000 visitors, packing a town that normally couldn't fill a single stadium. Brass bands compete around the clock, trumpets blaring from every direction, while attendees drink rakića and dance in the streets for days without sleep. The festival started modestly in 1961 as a small regional competition and has since grown into an event that international publications regularly list among the wildest music festivals in the world. Then there's the Exit Festival, held every July in Novi Sad, inside the 18th century Petrovaradin fortress. What started in 2000 as a student protest against the Milosevic regime has become one of Europe's premier music festivals, drawing over 200,000 attendees and headliners that include some of the biggest names in electronic and rock music. The setting itself, a fortress overlooking the Danube, gives the entire event a surreal, almost cinematic quality. These festivals reveal something important about Serbian culture, an ability to throw an enormous, unforgettable party, even in a country that many outsiders still associate primarily with war and hardship. Number 10. The language quirk that trips up every single tourist within the first hour. Serbian uses two alphabets interchangeably, Cyrillic and Latin, sometimes on the same street sign, sometimes on the same menu. Officially, Cyrillic is the constitutionally recognized script, and government documents use it exclusively. But daily life, advertising, and younger generations lean heavily toward the Latin alphabet, creating a strange visual patchwork throughout Belgrade. For visitors who don't read Cyrillic, this can be disorienting at first, street names appearing in one alphabet on the map and a different one on the actual street sign. But most Serbians switch effortlessly between both, a skill built into the education system from primary school onward. Beyond the alphabet, Serbian has an entire vocabulary of untranslatable words that reveal how the culture thinks. Merak describes a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction, usually tied to simple things: a good meal, good company, a nice afternoon with nothing urgent to do. There's no direct English equivalent, but once you've experienced it, sitting on a terrace in Skadaliha with a glass of rakića and no plans for the rest of the day, you understand exactly what merak means. There's also inat, a kind of stubborn defiance, doing something specifically because someone told you not to, which Serbians often cite half-jokingly as the true national character trait, the thing that got them through centuries of occupation and isolation when giving in would have been the easier choice. Serbian hospitality itself carries an almost sacred weight, tied to a concept that predates modern tourism entirely. Number 11. The hospitality tradition where refusing food is basically a crime. In Serbian culture, guests occupy a position close to royalty. There's an old saying, "Gost u kuću, Bog u kuću," which translates to, "A guest in the house is God in the house." Show up at a Serbian home, even unannounced, and you will be fed. Whether or not you're hungry, whether or not the host has time to prepare anything, whether or not you insist you already ate, refusing food or drink is considered genuinely offensive, and Serbians have developed an entire ritual around persistent, almost aggressive hospitality. You'll say no to a second helping. They'll serve it anyway. You'll say you're full. They'll bring dessert. This isn't pushiness for its own sake. It's a deeply held belief that a host's worth is measured by how well they take care of the people in their home. This hospitality extends beyond food into everyday interactions. Ask a stranger for directions in Belgrade, and there's a good chance they'll walk you there personally rather than simply pointing. But Serbian warmth exists alongside a fierce, sometimes prickly, national pride that outsiders need to understand before visiting. Number 12. The national pride that turns Kosovo into a conversation you should probably avoid at dinner. Serbia's relationship with Kosovo remains one of the most sensitive political topics in the Balkans. Serbia considers Kosovo an integral part of its territory, tied to medieval battles and monasteries, considered the birthplace of Serbian Orthodox identity. Most notably, the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, still commemorated today as a foundational moment in Serbian national identity. Kosovo declared independence in 2008, an act Serbia has never formally recognized, and the topic remains politically and emotionally charged for most Serbians, regardless of age. That said, Serbian national pride isn't only about geopolitical grievances. Novak Djokovic, arguably the greatest tennis player in history, is treated as something close to a national deity, his matches drawing crowds to public screenings in Belgrade's main squares that rival celebrations for a World Cup final. Nikola Tesla, born to Serbian parents, is claimed proudly as a national icon, his face appearing on Serbian currency. This mixture of historical grievance and modern pride creates a national character that's simultaneously defensive about the past and genuinely optimistic about the future. Number 13. The monasteries hiding in mountains that UNESCO calls irreplaceable. Scattered throughout Serbia's mountainous regions sit medieval Orthodox monasteries that date back to the 12th and 13th centuries, built by Serbian kings and adorned with frescoes so significant that art historians travel from around the world to study them. Studenica Monastery, founded in 1190 by Stefan Nemanja, the founder of the medieval Serbian state, contains frescoes considered among the finest examples of Byzantine-style painting anywhere in Europe. Sopoćani Monastery, another UNESCO World Heritage Site, holds a fresco known as the Dormition of the Virgin, painted around 1265, which art historians regularly cite as one of the greatest achievements of medieval European painting, predating the Italian Renaissance by nearly 2 centuries. Visitors who make the trip describe walking into these small stone churches and feeling genuinely transported, standing in front of paintings that have survived Ottoman occupation, 2 world wars, and communist rule, still vivid after 800 years. These monasteries remain active religious sites today, not museums, with monks and nuns still living and worshipping within their walls. Number 14. The healthcare system that costs almost nothing and somehow still works. Serbia operates a universal healthcare system funded through mandatory contributions, and for citizens, most medical care, including hospital stays, surgeries, and prescription medications, comes at minimal or no direct cost. For foreigners living in Serbia, even private healthcare remains remarkably affordable by Western standards. A private doctor's visit in Belgrade typically costs between $20 and $40. A dental cleaning runs around $30. Even more involved procedures, like an MRI scan, cost a fraction of what the same procedure would run in the United States, often under $200. This affordability has quietly attracted a growing number of medical tourists, particularly for dental work and cosmetic procedures, with clinics in Belgrade and Novi Sad, building reputations for quality care at prices that make the flight from Western Europe or North America worth it purely on cost savings alone. Combined with the low cost of living overall, this affordable healthcare system forms a significant part of why remote workers and retirees have started quietly relocating to Serbia over the past several years. Number 15. The digital nomad wave that nobody saw coming. Serbia doesn't offer a dedicated digital nomad visa the way some countries do, but its combination of low costs, decent internet infrastructure, and visa-free entry for many nationalities, including 90-day stays for US citizens, has made it an increasingly popular base for remote workers. Belgrade's co-working scene has expanded rapidly over the past 5 years, with spaces in the city center offering desks for around $150 a month, a fraction of similar spaces in Berlin or Lisbon. Internet speeds in Belgrade rank surprisingly high by European standards, often outperforming cities with far higher costs of living. Combined with a growing English-speaking population, particularly among younger Serbians who grew up watching American television, the language barrier that might deter remote workers in other Eastern European countries simply doesn't exist to the same degree in Belgrade. Serbia also maintains a flat income tax structure that for freelancers registering as sole proprietors can result in an effective tax rate significantly lower than most Western European countries. This has drawn a small but growing community of remote workers, crypto entrepreneurs, and freelancers who've discovered that Belgrade offers a genuinely livable European city experience at a fraction of the cost of Lisbon, Barcelona, or Berlin. Number 16. The countryside, where time seems to have simply stopped. Outside Belgrade and Novi Sad, rural Serbia tells a very different story than the capital's growing tech scene. Villages throughout central and southern Serbia have experienced significant population decline over the past few decades, as younger generations move to cities or leave the country entirely for better job opportunities in Germany, Austria, or Switzerland. Some villages have populations that skew heavily elderly, with grandmothers running small households alone, tending gardens and livestock much the way their own grandmothers did a century earlier. This depopulation mirrors trends seen throughout the Balkans, but it's produced an unexpected side effect. Rural Serbia has become a haven for anyone seeking genuine, unspoiled countryside experiences. Farmhouses that once housed large families now operate as small guest houses, offering homemade rakiza, meals cooked over wood fires, and a level of authenticity that's increasingly rare in a Europe where rural tourism often means manufactured experiences designed for Instagram rather than genuine daily life. Zlatibor, a mountain region in western Serbia, has become particularly popular for this kind of tourism. Its rolling green hills dotted with traditional wooden cottages and known for producing some of the country's best prosciutto and cheese. A weekend there, including a private cottage, 3 home-cooked meals a day, and homemade rakiza poured without being asked, typically costs less than a single night at a mid-range hotel in Vienna or Munich. Some cottages even come with a resident grandmother who insists on cooking every meal herself, treating paying guests exactly like visiting family, right down to scolding them for not eating enough. Number 17. The football passion that turns ordinary Sundays into small wars. Football holds a place in Serbian culture that borders on religious devotion, and the rivalry between Red Star Belgrade and Partizan, the 2 dominant clubs in the capital, ranks among the most intense derbies in European football. Known as the Eternal Derby, matches between these 2 clubs regularly produce attendance numbers that rival matches in far larger countries, with fan groups organizing elaborate, choreographed displays that have gained international attention on their own merits. This passion extends beyond club football into the national team, where Serbia's basketball program, somewhat surprisingly to outsiders, has actually produced more consistent international success than its football team, regularly competing for medals at the Olympics and World Championships. Serbia has produced a remarkable number of NBA players relative to its population, and basketball courts appear in nearly every neighborhood throughout Belgrade. This sporting culture reflects something broader about Serbian identity, a country that, despite its relatively small size and complicated recent history, consistently punches above its weight on the international stage. Number 18. The reason people keep coming back even after they leave. Ask anyone who's spent significant time in Serbia what keeps pulling them back, and you'll hear some version of the same answer. It's not any single thing, it's the combination, the affordability that lets you live comfortably on a fraction of what you'd need elsewhere in Europe. The directness of the people, refreshing after years of navigating polite but hollow small talk in more reserved cultures. The food, rich and unpretentious, built around family and hospitality rather than presentation. The history, visible everywhere, in bombed buildings left standing on purpose, in monasteries 8 centuries old still holding daily services, in a currency that once required a 500 billion dinar note and now sits stable and unremarkable. Serbia isn't a country that markets itself well internationally. It doesn't have the beach resorts of Croatia or the polished EU membership status of its neighbors. What it has instead is something harder to package into a tourism campaign. A genuine, occasionally rough around the edges, authenticity. A place where $200 still buys you a real apartment, where a cup of coffee is an invitation to sit for hours, and where a stranger showing up at your door means you're about to feed them, no questions asked. So here's the real question. Would you trade a smaller apartment and a bigger salary back home for a country where your money goes 4 times further, the people are unfiltered and warm in equal measure, and history sits quietly on every street corner, waiting for you to notice it? If this journey through Serbia surprised you, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what surprised you most. The rent, the women, or the traditions nobody talks about anymore. And if you've ever been to Serbia yourself, tell me your story below. I want to hear it.